you so much for joining us. I'm Amy LeBlanc. I'm Director of Special Services. Today we will be hearing from Sue Hans, who's a parent mentor through the Illinois State Board of Education, as well as a parent of children with special needs, and she will be presenting on the parent perspective for IEPs. And this is the first in what we hope will be a series of talks and an ongoing relationship with Sue as we look to really establish core and build this communication and interactive process. So without further ado, I will introduce Sue, our speaker for today.
Thank you. As Amy mentioned, this is a parent's perspective, and I'll talk to you a little bit about why I have so much fervor and so much energy and so much commitment to my perspective around the IEP process. She did also mention that I work under a grant from the Illinois State Board of Education. So 8 years ago, as a part of No Child Left Behind, in the law, most people don't know this, but in the federal law, there are stipulations that school districts have to show meaningful intent to have family engagement in their school districts. And there isn't much teeth in that, like there's teeth in the law that protects our kids in special ed, but most districts do, as CORE is a good representation of that, as today is a good representation of that. Most districts go at that with the best of intent to try to improve family engagement. The state of Illinois took the money that came from the federal government and they established the Parent Mentor Program. There were 15 of us hired 8 years ago, and the primary purpose of the grant is to provide different ways of approaching the IEP conversation, all right? And let me explain to you what I mean by that. If we think about special education, conflict resolution on a continuum, okay? Think about conflict resolution on a continuum. And I were to ask all of you, if you really get into a disagreement with your district, if things are really not going well, what is traditionally, typically, or commonly the tool that many people use as a lever to facilitate that disagreement? Go ahead. An attorney, very good. And the specific process, they file for due process. Because that's what we know, right? That's how we have learned to come into that conversation. So if you think about the continuum like this, and if due process and the evoke of the law is to this side of the continuum, I operate on this side of the continuum. Once somebody has brought an attorney into the conversation and they have filed for due process, I'm out. Because I fundamentally believe in my heart, after, I'm only 29 years old, but I've done this for 30 years. Okay, for all the years that I have been doing this as a parent, and now all the years I've been doing this as a parent mentor, once people file for due process and attorneys are in the room, what are we talking about now? What's the discussion in the room? Think about it. There you go. Say it loud. The law. The law. And who are we no longer talking about in the same specificity that we can talk about as parents? There you go. I have lived it. I have been there. I have seen it. I believe it. And I'll stand firm with great conviction in front of any group of attorneys and say the same thing as I have been invited to do many times. Once lawyers come in the room, we're talking about the law. And we lose the aspect as a parent to talk about our child, all right? So I operate on this side of the continuum. For 8 years, I have worked to do individual work with families, individual work with school districts. I work with parent groups. I do workshops like this to talk to people about what I think is real family engagement in the IEP process. And so today what I want to do with you is talk to you about what that philosophically looks like and then provide you some very specific strategies that you, I hope, would think you are implementable that you can move taking forward. So as I said, this is what I do. And I do have parents call me. And most often I would tell you that 90% of the calls that come to me is that people are in some ways blocked in the communication. That's how I like to describe it. They're stuck. All right? And when people get stuck, and by and large when people have gone to the point that they're ready to file for due process, what are the things do you believe are broken? What's happened? The relationship is gone. What else? What happens when the relationship goes? Say it again. Can go because why? What's taken its place? Emotion. Right? Very good. The trust is gone. Okay? Once. Say it again.
The law is not being followed.
You're going to get real comfortable with me real fast, or you're going to pull back from me real fast when I push back. So when I say the law is not being followed, in my mind, in all the due process cases that I went back and studied when I took my job, it was never about the law not being followed. It's always about the point at which somebody lost trust, connection, and the relationship. Then they went to the law. You with me on that? So, right, if I'm in a conversation with somebody and it's good and the relationship is good and the trust is there, as soon as that shifts, you bet I'm going to hook onto the law. So that comes once the relationship, the trust, and the communication breaks down. And we're going to get into this in detail. Yes?
I mean, this may sound a bit naive, but why can't there be both? Why?
There absolutely can.
You know, talking about my child, but having legal representation to make sure that the law is being followed and that the rights are all being respected.
Okay, so we're going to parking lot your question, and if I don't answer that question in an hour and a half, I have not done my job. Okay? And you're going to remind me of that at the end of the talk. Okay? Okay, so I do not have any letters after my name. I always tell educators that, like people that come, like LMNOP, like they have like 1,000 letters after their names. I'm like, oh my God, okay. I have no letters after my name. These are my letters after my name. All right? Now, I have 4 kids. I'm perfectly aware that there are 5 children on that slide. I don't want you to think like I'm completely bonkers, like I've lost my mind, okay? I want to tell you about them because it's important to me when I push back a little bit, and I hope that you'll push at me as much as I push at you, that you understand where that passion comes from. So my oldest daughter, Brianne, who's in the middle of the picture on your left, is now 31 years old, again, even though I'm
29.
Thank you. And she went through school several years ago and never was actually identified for an IEP, but she received many modifications to her curriculum. She received many accommodations to the amount of time she took on tests. She received a great deal of support from each of her teachers in the middle school and high school, as well as elementary school. She was fortunate, it was just serendipitous, that her 5th grade teacher actually went to the junior high the same time she did. Very fortunate thing. You can relate to that, many of you, I'm sure, right? And then really mapped out what she needed going into high school. This was pre-response to intervention. This was pre that time. What do you think they called that back then? When somebody got just good modifications, good accommodations, got what they needed to function in the classroom? Ah, I love you guys. And what was the modifier we put in front of teaching? Good teaching. Great audience. It was just really good teaching. It was a teacher who just understood that this is a student who really can cut it and really can make it, but I need to continue to make these adjustments and these modifications, all right? But this was a child who is very artistic and has now a very successful career as an artist. That side of the brain, well developed. Academic side of the brain, not so much, right? So, and again, remember as I talk about these kids, I was talking to somebody when we came in the room, this is all my husband's DNA, right? Remember when we go through this, okay? So 3 to 4 hours of homework every night. That's the kind of student she was, okay? Struggled, struggled, struggled. This next guy that you see at the top is a kid who went through school accumulating the D labels. Now what do I mean by that? No, first it started as a little, how does it start when they're in elementary school? It's a little ADD, right? It's a little ADD, little ADHD, and then the hormones kick in and it becomes very good. That's what it feels like, right? Boom! What happened in my house? He got in junior high with a label of what's the emotional and behavioral disability, all right? So kids who very often go to therapeutic day schools because they cannot function in the gen ed environment. And so this is a student who, my son was very good academically, but literally could not really navigate the construct of the school building. So in his freshman year in high school, at this point, I want to share with you that my older 2 children are not mine from birth. I got them in marriage from my husband, but I got them when they were 8 and 10. And I'm going to tell you, you taking any kids through the teenage years, there's just as much blood, sweat, and tears, right? In that as there is in giving birth to them more. They're mine. Make no mistake, these kids are mine. They have always lived with me, and they're mine. But I came into Billy's life at the time when he was articulating up to the high school, all right? Some of these stories lay the foundation for the rest of my talk. So I walked into the high school setting, and this is really the first formal IEP meeting I had been in with him. And how many people are in the room? Come on. Oh, come on, let's put a number to it.
8, 9.
15. There are 15 people in the room for the high school articulation. Sorry, brace yourselves for those days, they're coming. I had never actually been to an IEP meeting before. I have been 20 plus years in the business world. I want you to hear the things that I'm going to say. I was not intimidated. I was not intimidated, and it was not that I couldn't find my voice. I didn't understand the meeting. So I walked into the room and I thought, okay, so somebody's going to produce an agenda at some point. Like somebody's going to give me an agenda, right? Like where's the agenda? So I'm going to So I want you to write that down. Agenda. All right? There is no reason why IEP meetings don't have an agenda to help us navigate and to help people like my poor husband, who's an artist and very visual, follow the meeting. Because IEP meetings can be very, very difficult for all of us because they happen auditorily for the most part. And we need visual in order to track. So we should be putting agendas together, and I'm going to talk to you about how we can help do that as parents. So I walked into the room, and 15 people, no agenda, and I sat there and I thought, wow, this is really fascinating. Now I wanted to share with you and be so open with you to let you know that Billy was not my birth child, because yes, you do come into that a little differently. You know, you have a slightly different ability to buck up, if you will. And so I was really able to kind of take a back seat and observe the process. And I thought, this is fascinating. All 15 of these people are going to speak, I think. And how long do you think the meeting lasted? 1 hour. And at the end of it, they asked me, and these are good friends of mine now. I mean, we have great relationships. They asked me, do you have anything you want to say? And I'm like, wow, wow. Okay, no, I don't think so. So we came back. Unfortunately, Billy's behavior accelerated, and we came back like 3 or 4 weeks later. And how many people are in the room? 15. Now, keep in mind, I don't know these people. What did you say? 17? Yeah, it was growing exponentially. Oh, very funny. Okay, very funny. No. No. So I don't know any of these people. That's important for you to know too. Okay, so again, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to grab the gist of this time. This is, no. We go through this meeting again, and I'm like, this is amazing. I don't understand the structure. I don't understand the format. I don't really understand. So here's what I want you to know. I did not have relationships. I did not understand the meeting. I did not understand how to connect in order to advocate effectively. Keep these pieces of information in mind. So our decision at home was that Billy would be better served if we placed him residentially. We had that conversation with the school, and Billy did end up going away, much to his benefit, to a residential program, and then came back and finished at a private high school back in the Chicagoland area. Store that fact. It's important for us in about 45 minutes, okay? Billy is now doing very, very well. He's a manager at an automobile service station. He makes far more money than the daughter that we spent 6 figures on educating in art. Thank you very much. He owns his own condominium. I didn't own a condominium at his age. He pays his own bills. He's doing very, very well. The next child would kill me if he saw this picture, but I like it too much and I won't swap it out because he's 19 years old now. He's a freshman in college. He went through school with an IEP for an auditory processing disability that manifests itself in reading fluency. So he struggled a great deal with his fluency. So he was pulled out all the way through elementary school, and then had his IEP in the middle school. This was a student who came to me in high school and said, I don't want to do it anymore. I said, what don't you want to do? I don't want the IEP. I don't want to go to the IEP meetings, and I don't want the services. I said, okay, so what does that mean to you then? You're going to have to learn how to self-advocate, because what we're going to replace with interventions coming to you, you need to step in with advocacy. And we made a very strategic decision at home about what that looked like and why he would need to do that. Now you have to also know this is a kid who was very comfortable and loved saying, you know, Mom, I think I'm going to build a house in B-land, okay? And I want to know if you're going to be comfortable there, which means no honors classes for me, Mom. I'm not going to get A's, but I'm going to get B's. And if you're comfortable with that and I'm comfortable with that, that's how I want to proceed through high school. Okay, so that's the deal we struck. And we dropped his IEP going into high school. Yeah, see the eyes? Okay. There isn't a whole lot that I haven't been through. There isn't a whole lot you're going to throw at me that I haven't been through. Then the last one I want to tell you, I like to call the jewel in my little crown. I do realize has double billing up there. She deserves it. She's the Tasmanian devil with Down syndrome. This idea that they're all sweet. Does anybody in the room have a child with Down syndrome? they're sweet and loving it, that they're all, sorry, so not true, so not true. I got one that is all teenager, all nasty, all the time, is very much like a typical kid. She's hearing impaired. She has, because of my decisions over the course of her 14 years, been in 9 different schools. I look back and regret a lot of my decisions. I've made tons of mistakes as her advocate. I have made mistakes. But it's okay. She is where she is. She's growing. She's thriving. And she's in a life skills program at Northbrook Junior High. I live in Northbrook, by the way. Sorry. So she's in a life skills program at Northbrook Junior High. So technically, she's my only one still left in school. But I've been to more than my fair share of IEP meetings. Okay? So I ask you to describe to me in a few words, no swearing, how you feel about IEP meetings. Tell me the words that come to mind.
Checking the box.
Checking, that feels like checking the box. Say it again. Tense. Intimidating.
I think it feels like you're in this meeting where everybody else knows the rules and you don't. And so you put up a protection mode because you don't know the rules. Because my child did not come with a special education law book. And nor did I ever want to have to go that way to understand it. So I feel like somebody has just put me in a room and said, here's how it's went wrong.
I would agree with that. And let me shape that a little if I may. I believe that the law was put in place in 1975, the federal law that protects our children and their rights in schools, IDEA, that was implemented in 1975 was, without any question, and make no mistake, the best thing that could have ever happened, right? I work with people who were teaching children with special needs before that law was implemented. I work with people still who were taking kids 25 miles away to a small room, kids with learning disabilities. I'm not talking about kids with profound and significant needs or impacted by their disability. I'm talking about kids with learning disabilities. The law is an amazing, amazing thing, and it's within our lifetime. It seems like a long time ago, but 35 years is really not that long in an industry for that kind of seismic change to have taken place. But unfortunately, as we have moved significantly in what it's done for our children in terms of inclusion and academics and interventions and program development, we have not moved the implementation of the conversation. So I would submit to you, it's the law that builds this construct that makes these conversations so stiff. It's not the people, it's the law. The construct of the law makes the conversations as stiff as they are. Now, I am not going to suggest anything to you here today because there's people in the room that would keep me in check, plus I'm being videotaped, so I really have to behave, okay? That would be illegal, but I will tell you, I am a big proponent of understanding how to move right along the edge of the law to open up the conversation so that it's meaningful for us as parents and meaningful advocacy for your student. Meaningful advocacy for your students. So my submission to you is that people get a little stuck and a little rigid in how they implement the procedural safeguards in the law. So that's what we're going to talk about. So fundamentally, basically, in the time I spent with you today, this is the visual construct that I'd like you to keep in mind. I'm going to talk to you about the IEP meeting itself or any meeting that you have on behalf of your child. We'll talk about the specific way to approach that meeting. But I'm going to talk to you about those things that I have come to really believe have a much greater influence on the success of that meeting, all right, than the procedural safeguards. And it's what I alluded to before, that we have an understanding that if things break down, what has broken down? Give me the words again. Trust. What else? Relationships, okay? And communication. So look at my slide.
You're dealing with your child. You are in charge. I'm in charge of my child's education. It's a very emotional presence. And I don't know what I don't know. So when you're in a room with people who know the law and who aren't quite familiar, it's very difficult.
Okay, so here, hold one sec. Wait, hold on 1 second. So I'm always going to take advantage when somebody gives me such fertile material, okay, to work with. So we're talking about the fact that I'm going to give you a way to enter into the conversation that has nothing to do with the law. Yes, you're walking into a room where we have this tight construct because it's built on the law. We're going to talk about coming into that conversation in a different way so that you can enter in as the parent in all the power that that brings you. Because as the parent, we hold the power in managing our child's life. As a parent, we hold the power in understanding our kids. But if we continually try to step into the conversation in the box of the procedural safeguards, whose playground are you playing on? Theirs. Okay? The playground that we want to play on together is about the kid. So do you understand why I reshaped that? Because I want you to keep coming back to the idea that I am not going to sit here and teach you about, now, I am going to come back at another time, and we're going to talk about IEP 101, and I'm going to explain the law to you inside and out and make your eyeballs roll up into your head, okay? I'm happy to do it, and I will do it. And I will talk to you about every single way that children become eligible and what that looks like under the law. That's not what we're doing today, though, okay? So, because I don't believe in the end, that's what moves conversations.
I'm with you in terms of the parent, and I actually had very good positive IEP meetings, but it's because I have the knowledge, and knowledge is different than the law, is what I would propose to you.
I would agree with you.
In the sense that I have spent the hours educating myself, and when I came into the IEP meetings, as I grew to know more, I think I gained respect from my IEP team because I was knowledgeable, and we really built a very positive partnership. But it wasn't until I spent the time and the energy and made the effort to read about the law, but also read, more importantly, about the successful components of an IEP document and how those are created and what the best practices are.
So I won't disagree with you. I'm going to ask you to pause. I'm going to ask you to pause. I'm not going to disagree with that at all, but I'm going to substitute in this conversation that I think that there are things that we should learn, educate ourselves about, and practice that are as meaningful, if not more meaningful, than the law. So let me dig in. Let me dig in, because otherwise you're going to be so disappointed in 45 minutes when I've only been through 5 of my slides, won't you be? Okay, so here's what I want you to understand in this construct. I fundamentally believe this is it. If you take the foundation out of the 2 hexagons that I have underneath the IEP meeting, if you take away relationships, communication, and collaborative problem solving, and if you take away the right hexagon, which is what do we do with great intention to build partnerships outside of the IEP meeting. Did everybody hear what I just said? What do we do with great intention to build relationships outside of the IEP meeting? If you remove those 2 hexagons, there is nothing I can do to help you sustain that meeting. Once a month, somebody calls me and asks me to come to an IEP meeting because they're about to go into conflict. My response is always a very polite, no, I will not come to your meeting, but I will help you cancel it. Because the most powerful thing you can do, when you're about to walk into a contentious IEP meeting is to cancel it. Why? Because, I'm going to come back to that. The first thing I want you to shift into is this visual construct. The IEP process is not, I'll come back to those other slides, is not an annual event. It is not. The IEP process and your conversation around your child's IEP and the implementation of the IEP is a living, moving organism, I would submit to you. Right? And everything you do and everything you say every day in these buildings and in relation to your child, in relation to the school, in relation to your district, impacts the relationship, impacts the communication, and can ultimately impact what comes into the room. For you and for them, okay? So I want you to think about the IEP meeting like a living organism, a DNA molecule, if you will. And if I broke any one of these cells, they say communication and relationship. I don't know if it's readable on your slide. Each hexagon says relationship, communication. If I break one, if somebody is abrupt with me on the phone, if I am abrupt with the speech therapist, if I have an unpleasant exchange when my child gets picked up after school, right? If something is wrong and we don't go to resolve that and we bring it into the room, have we not all had this experience where you walk in the room and you're harboring just a little something, right? We've all been there. And we could pretend that it doesn't have an impact on the process, but of course it does. I want you to think about this as a DNA molecule. If I break one piece of this, one cell, what happens to the organism as a whole? It's broken. It's broken. But I would submit that 99% of the IEPs that we walk into, not 100%, and maybe my 99% is even too high, the vast majority of IEP meetings we walk into, don't we all have at least one broken cell walking in the room? We do. Even if it's that we may be in conflict with somebody about a goal or the draft of a goal, sometimes it's big, sometimes the entire side of the organism is broken, we're walking in and we're not going to agree on placement. But understand that this is what you are looking to achieve. Am I walking into that room understanding that all the pieces have been connected? And I'm going to drill into the specificity of what do I mean by that? What is that? Okay? So now I'm going to go backwards for a second. I want you to recognize, and I already mentioned this, that clearly I understand, clearly in my job I understand the law. I choose not to spend my time there. Clearly I understand what the steps are in the IEP process, and we will come back at another workshop and we will drill into great specificity what each of these steps in this process means, all right? So that everybody has a better understanding of that procedurally and what that document looks like. We will come back and have a conversation around what is eligibility and how do we determine eligibility? What's the adverse effect that it has? What are the instructional needs and whether or not this makes a child entitled for services? This is where 90% of the conversation is happening. Either here at some step in the process or here in some step of the decision. This requires that I do IEP 101 with you, all right? But I wanted to acknowledge that that's the meeting that you're walking into. My time with you is to now say, how do you enter into that conversation knowing that that's where it's happening, okay? So it does require this, that we let down a sense of our procedure, right? It's a pretty good turn of phrase, don't you think? Thank you. I get a smile from somebody in the front, all right? We have to let down that collective procedural safeguard. We have to let it down for a minute and focus on what I refer to as this process. This process, okay? All right, so I'm going to start with the meeting. I'm going to talk to you now very specifically about how I would like to see you come at that meeting a little bit differently. Can everybody see who this is? All right, so, sorry, I make no apologies. I love Martha. Love her. Now, why do I love her? I love Martha Stewart because I am absolutely fascinated by somebody that could take truly some of the most mundane tasks in the world, and that what people chose to try to really fight against in the 1970s, to liberate themselves from domestic chores, am I right? And elevate them to a status in a multi-billion-dollar industry that we all feel like, oh really, I should be making doilies for my table, right? Right? If I don't make my own napkins for Thanksgiving, I'm not worthy of. I mean, it's pretty amazing what she has done to that homemaking industry. I admire that. I'm sorry she broke the law. She did her time. We have to all move past that, okay? But what's really fascinating about Martha for me is I came to this experientially, is that I married late in life, and when I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, I couldn't cook, wow, could I not cook, okay? Bad. And I'd like to now tell you there isn't any magazine that you couldn't put in front of me or any recipe that I can't do. I immersed myself into the work. I said, I will learn to do this and I will learn to do it very, very well. And I came to have a great deal of appreciation for Martha's approach because Martha talks about process. Martha just doesn't talk about the mechanics or the tablespoons or the cups or the saute. She talks about the mindfulness around the process to approach it. So much so that she convinces people they can do their own weddings. That's my favorite. Yes, Martha. Sure, I can do a wedding for 500. But she is the one who put together, this is what you do 6 months in advance, this is what you do 1 month in advance. You've seen this. It's present now everywhere. Make no mistake, that was Martha Stewart. Every other cooking show, every other magazine has adopted that now. Martha started that 20 years ago. All right? And she said, if you have a process to approach this, you can dissect and understand the conversation that you're getting into and really participate in a meaningful way. So this is Martha's quote. If you're going to bake cookies, bake like you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company that makes cookies. Be committed to the process. If you are going to be your child's advocate, do not have the IEP meeting happen to you. Step into this process as an engaged partner, doing homework, preparing, talking to people, and developing that matrix that I talked about of conversations that will allow you to come into the meeting feeling like, I got this. I got this. I know what I'm coming into. I know where the bumps are going to be. I know where we might be in conflict. Okay, conflict is not bad. Make no mistake, I'm going to talk to you about this. Conflict is not bad, as long as we know we're coming into the conflict, okay? So, I want you to think about the IEP meeting like Thanksgiving. How many of you cook for Thanksgiving? Keep your hands up high. Proud. Okay, how long do you cook? All day. How long do you prepare for the meal? Say it loud and say it proud. Weeks. Now, why is it weeks? For people in the room that are going, seriously, I take a Jell-O mold to my mother-in-law. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Why is it weeks? Well, it's weeks for me. Say it. But what is it? Let's get into the nitty-gritty. What is it? You pick the menu. What else do you do? You pick the decorations. What else do you do? You have... Wow. Oh, I'm coming to your house. Invitations. I love it. But no, but I get it. Email. Okay, this is what time. You bring this. I get that. You have people coming in from out of town, right? You're getting a bedroom ready. You're changing sheets. You're kicking your son out of the basement, right? You're doing all these things that you need to do. Am I right? It takes weeks. If you work, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of weekends, a lot of planning. The actual cooking is really a small part of everything that goes into it. I always say to my husband, once I have the groceries in the house, I'm good. Like, don't you feel that way? Like, once it's all, now the cooking is well under control. I want you to think about the IEP meeting exactly the same way. Okay? Remember that feeling you get? The house is clean, the silver's polished, everybody's ready, everybody's invited, the groceries are in the house. That's how you should be feeling by the time you walk into an IEP meeting. The meal itself is the sharing of the work, most of which is done in advance. The degree to which the sit-down is enjoyed is dependent in large part on how well the meal is planned and the skill of the cook. Am I right? So if you came to my house, and I don't know any of you in the room well, and you came, I don't know you. You came to my house, I invited you, I sent you an email saying, come to my house for Thanksgiving. And you came to the door and I was like, oh my God, I'm really glad to see you. I'm really glad to see you. But you know what? My sister just dropped off her kids. I'm sick of them. They're just brats, and she just went to get a manicure and a pedicure. My mother's here if she tells me one more time she doesn't like the way my hair is cut. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I have no idea where my husband is. He's grouting the bathtub. But come on in. I really want you here, okay? And then you came to my table, and we sat down, and I said, you know what? Oh, I've just been Everybody see what it is? It's a frozen turkey breast. I'm tired of slugging around a 30-pounder. What would you think? What would you think? Disorganized. Disorganized. What else would you think? Wait, don't go to solution yet. I love people that go to solution right away. Don't go to solution yet, but hold that one, okay? What else would you be thinking about me? Yeah, solution. You're in solution. Okay, but I want you to hear, keep the analogy tight in your head when I get back to solution, because your analogies have parallels in the real world of IEP land, okay? What else are you thinking about me? This is not going to happen, okay? This is not going to happen. She is so not got her act together. What else are you thinking? What? Okay, say it. What else? Somebody always gives me this one too. On top of stress, I might be a little, say it? Kooky. Kooky's so much nicer than crazy. Thank you for that. I haven't had kooky in a while. Ooh, she's a little kooky, okay? How many of you have been in IEP meetings where somebody delivers up a little part of a frozen bird? Or how many of you have ever delivered a frozen bird? Or a full bird? So when I came into my son's IEP meeting at the high school, and in front of 15 people who were strangers to me, and I said, I'm very sorry that I do not understand this process, and I'm sorry that we don't have the relationships that we should, but we've made a decision as a family to place our son residentially. What did I deliver in the room? How big? 40-pounder, solid as a rock. Boom, shakalaka-laka. Was it the right thing to do? I'll never know. Does he have good outcomes? Yes, but will I ever know whether it was the best thing for him? I'll never know. Because I did not have anybody else in the conversation with me Okay? I didn't come into that in a collaborative way. I wasn't angry. I didn't bring a lawyer. I just was like, wow, this kind of isn't working for me, so boom. All right? Now I want you to just think for another moment. How many of you have ever entered into an IEP meeting and delivered a little bit of a bird yourself? Just a little. Okay, okay. Now let's go to solution. What can we do? I've put the frozen turkey on the table. What are the solutions? Get out. What did I do at the high school? I got out. Some people get out. Okay? What else? Takeout. What's takeout? In IEP land, what's the equivalent to takeout? No, I'm going to make you drill into this one because we all do it. I don't want to eat frozen turkey. I don't like what you're serving, so I'm going to order something else. And how do we do that as parents? There you go. You're a great audience. What do we do? Say it louder. I bring in outside providers. I bring in private providers. I bring outside evaluators in, and I bring out attorneys in. That's carry out. Because I don't like what's happening in this room. I don't know how to move it. So I'm going to bring in something. No, 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 not yet. Not yet, not yet. I'm going to bring in something else, okay? Now, is there a place for them in the conversation? Absolutely. Should they be at the table? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay? The more the merrier in my mind, as long as everybody's in the conversation, right? Coming to the same place with the same amount of preparation. And that we haven't brought them in because we think that they're going to defrost this. Does this make sense? Okay. How else can we defrost that bird? What else would make that work? You're at my table. This is a disaster. I've just delivered up this bird. What else would make it, what would literally at the Thanksgiving table make it better? Let's all pitch in, okay? If we had really good relationships, really strong relationships, a great sense of humor. So what I seek is that we as parents do not allow the meeting to happen to us, that we are not coming into the room trying to figure out what the rules and the regs are, but that we are instead coming into the room having done a number of things to fully prepare and have that great sense of, I'm ready to cook. Not I'm still grocery shopping, not I'm still doing linens, I'm ready to cook. It is very important that you all understand philosophically, and if I had a half a day with you, we would go through a full collaborative problem-solving training. But by the time you get face-to-face with people, in mediation or collaborative problem-solving training, you're in stage 3 of the process. Stage 3. So I always show my age when I say Henry Kissinger. Tell the truth. How many of you know who Henry Kissinger is? Thank you. I really appreciate that because sometimes I do this and people look at me and I'm like, wow. Wow. I'm so old. So the best facilitators, the best mediators, the best collaborative problem solvers never walk into a room cold. Never. And that's why when people call me and ask me to come to an IEP meeting, I don't ever go to IEP meetings. You need to know that. Never. Because if I have to go, what's the problem? Right. So what's my goal? Pull out of that meeting and let's go back and do repair to get us back to a place where you feel like you can come into that room with your voice. Okay? So the work going into the meetings, phase 1 and phase 2 is collecting data, collecting information, having conversations, having conversations, having conversations, and being committed to that process before you walk in. Now, this usually sets a tremor off in the room because people eventually are going to raise their hand and say, people don't want to talk to me before the IEP meeting. And I would say that very often when I get into a coaching situation with an individual parent, I discover it's because we're asking somebody outside the IEP meeting to make a decision with them or to give them some specificity that's not legal. You can't ask somebody to talk about placement, right? Or anything with great specificity outside that room, but you can ask this question. I'm only going to ask you to remember 3 things by the time I'm done talking this fast for an hour and a half. One is that you should go into meetings with agendas. So you all wrote that one down? This is the second thing I want you to write down. The conversations that you're having, your work before an IEP meeting is to call every single person that's on that list and say this. Is there anything that you're going to say in that meeting that I've never heard before? Not what are you going to recommend? Not are you going to change my minutes? Not are you going to recommend a different placement? No, 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 no. Those are not the questions I'm coaching you to ask. I'm coaching you to say, is there anything that you're going to say in that meeting about my daughter Amara that I may not be aware of, that I haven't heard? And if so, can you give me 10 minutes of your time to just talk to me about that? Because it's not possible for me, I'll use all the people on my team, Jody, my OT, to listen to the information that's going on in the room, to process it, and to come up with any intelligent response in the moment. I can't do it. And I'm a practiced professional at it. I can't do it. So can you give me 10 minutes? Just tell me what's going to be in your report. I don't need a copy of your written report. I don't need it. I just need to know there's not anything in that I've never heard before. And I go through every person on the list. It's not uncommon that parents will call me. We're prepping for their IEP meeting. They go to the 4th person on the list. They say, I've never met that person. Wow! I pull the lever. You pick up the phone. Hi, this is Mrs. Hans. I'm sorry that we've never had a chance to meet. Times, right? I know, but I do know that you see my son or daughter once a week. I'm wondering if we could find 5 minutes to meet face to face before we walk into a meeting together to talk about my student. Fundamental shifts in the way we approach that, okay? So the question is there anything that you're going to say, or is there anything in your report that I haven't heard before? And if we haven't met, could we have 5 minutes to meet face to face before we walk into a room to problem solve together? Now, what have I done in the language that I've chosen? I've opened up the communication, okay? And I've set the stage that I don't want any surprises, and I don't want any part of a frozen bird coming down on the table. All right? You do need to have a good understanding of the framework of the discussion. So I do agree with you. It is important that you walk into the room and know whether or not, am I in the 3-year evaluation? Is this a domain meeting? Or are we, these things are important, and when we come back to do IEP 101, we'll talk about those things. It is important that you understand the interest and the framework of the people you're in the room with about how they're moving through the conversation. Does that make sense? If they think they're in a domain meeting, they're not talking about goals. If they think they're in an eligibility meeting, right? So those pieces are important, and so I do encourage you to have clarity around, do I really understand what meeting I'm in? And that you do get out an old document so that you have familiarity with how do we move through this meeting. And that's the first place I'm going to ask you to do your own work. I'd like you to take that document and create an agenda from that document that works for you. And then you, along with another piece I'm going to give you, are going to go into the person who facilitates your meeting and say, this is how I'd be most comfortable coming at the discussion. Does this work at all for you within your framework? Okay? You're familiarizing yourself, you're gathering information, and then if you are going into a meeting where you're going to talk about goals, this is one of the places that I find people are most stuck in IEP meetings, very often stuck around the goals, all right? A lot of that for me has to do with a good understanding of the decision making and the law about what goes into a good goal. I'm going to agree with that. But the other part of it I think has to do with when we have no other way to come into the conversation, sometimes I think we get a little stuck micromanaging other pieces of it. Let me talk to you about what I mean by that. Okay. So when we talk about goals, when you're prepping, you've taken out the document, you're putting together an agenda, and you're going to make a list of statements that describe what you expect your child to know and what your child will be able to do. I turn everything into parent language. Okay? I got news for you. You need to understand you're getting the world according to Sue. I don't even begin to understand 70, 80, 90% of something. I'm like, wow. Okay? That's the educator's job, to measure that. My job is to convey what I want my child to learn to do. So let's talk about it in terms of my life skills student. She went to the middle school this year, okay? I wanted to see whether or not she could function without a Velcro aid. All right? She didn't navigate hallways all that well. So I said to them, I think we need to peel off the aid. Everybody's eyes went, all right, like this. And I am in conversations with people who really, so what is it that you want her to learn to do? I would like Amara to learn to get out of the car, to go into the building, and to make it to her locker. That's what I'm looking for the first 60 days of school. Okay, that's not the goal though. I want you guys to hear this. The statement is my purpose of what I want. I want her to get out of the car, walk in the building, and get to her locker. The goal is, how do we teach that, and how do we break that down into a teachable skill? So when she gets out of the car, she gets a picture schedule on Boardmaker that shows, you guys are with me for those who have kids who are, right? And specifically, I go to the desk, I say hi to Mrs. Gale, I walk to my locker, I put my backpack in, I walk to my classroom, and we check off on a list. So the goal was teaching Amar to follow a task list in sequence. Does that make sense? And I allowed them to tell me what is the teachable part of what I want her to be able to do. I encourage you all, when you leave today, to think of one thing you'd like your kid to learn to do, and to just get into a learning conversation with an educator around, how does this become a goal? Teach yourself how this happens. Like, what does this mean to you as the educator? What would you be teaching them? That is one of the things that you can learn to do that will elevate you as an advocate far and above anything else. How does this translate into school? Is this making sense?
Again, I agree with you. It gets back to knowledge. It's trying to, as a parent, figure out, well, what are kids supposed to know in first grade? What are they supposed to know in second grade? And guess what I found? On the Illinois State Board of Education website, there are these magic things called learning standards that do an outstanding job of both life skill-wise and academic and social-emotional, giving you a nice overview of what the focus is for the curriculum for each grade.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. I believe that our jobs as parents, particularly for those of us who have challenged learners, is to understand with reason what is happening to the rest of the typical peers, where are they going, and then what is it that I want my child to be able to do. I don't disagree with that. And we'll talk about that in IEP 101. What are those learning standards? What's at the Common Core curriculum and all those things. But for me, I like to enter into the conversation saying, my job in this is to tell you what I'm hoping they can do. Your job as an educator is to make it a goal. Translate it for me. Oh, like whatever you do with that wacky thing with those percentages, okay? I don't know about you guys, but after all these years, am I right? They say to you they made 70% of this. I'm like, oh my God, it doesn't resonate for me. I don't get it. That seems to be what you need to do for the Illinois State Board of Education. That seems to be what you need to do to get your IDEA funding. I get that. God bless you, okay? But it doesn't mean anything to me. So don't say to them that doesn't mean anything without replacing it with something that means something to you. Make sense? Okay. Okay, so here's what happens to most people when they're in the goal conversation. What is this, gentlemen? It's a football play. And football plays give us this. This is the name of this picture is a player's perspective, right, with a long, long way to go. Football plays give us, what do they give us? What does a play give us? For what? Go shorter. Truly, what's a play? There you go. Gain yards. And usually how many yards at a time? Okay, I'm doing this for a very specific reason. Football plays give us 10-yard strategies. It's a down, okay? And we do it 10 yards at a time. In IEP land, typically we're writing goals for a year. And unfortunately, very often, I'm in conversations with parents who are so into that specificity around that goal in that year, they sometimes lose the perspective, right, of what really good goal setting is over the arc of a timeline. It requires that you as a parent have the ability to take your lens in and out. So sometimes we can be in conversations with educators about goals, and they'll feel like, wow, you are 5 years out from where we think your student is right now. And other times, we're trying to get parents to pull back to say, reasonably, where do we want to be? So let me be more specific and explain to you what I mean by that. Because ultimately, when you come up to the skybox, this is a skybox view, then you can see the goal line. It's not when you're down here in that 10-yard gain of what are we doing this year. So what do I mean? Very, very common that I get calls from parents who say they're pulling back services for my kid in the middle school around executive functioning or resource room or organizational help. A lot of calls. And I get into the conversation to discover it's because they are making good academic strides, and we're trying to calibrate whether or not the student is going to be able to succeed in the high school setting because this student does have the potential to go on to post-secondary education. They are going on to college, right? And I have many friends who would stand up here arm in arm with me and tell you, you'd much rather find out that your kid can't cut it when they're still with you here, as opposed to in another state and it's costing you $30,000 a year to educate them about self-advocacy and organizational skills. So if the goal is that we're teaching the student how to self-advocate, how to organize, how to really bring into focus what they can or can't do, let's say around executive functioning, we may want to be strategic and pull back in 8th grade in the freshman year to determine whether or not they're going to fail now. Is this making sense to you? Because the goal is this kid's going to college, and we need to know whether or not they can cut it. Because kids, by and large, that are coming out of high schools with IEPs for those needs are flunking in college, not because they can't cut it academically. It's because they can't pull themselves together organizationally. Does this make sense? So you understand what I'm saying? My example is, and I can go into many examples, but what happens more often than not when people get hung up on the goals, this is where they are. I call it turfing. People call me and say, you know what, I just don't want that word in the goal. And I'm like, oh my God, you're a gopher. You're turfing. Okay? Pull out of that. Pull out of that and get into a conversation around interest. And this is where I want to go in the next part of the conversation. Your job is, for preparation for an IEP meeting, is that you should all be writing your own reports. Don't say no. Do you not think that team doesn't meet on a regular basis and do their own work? You bet they do. They come into that room prepared. They come into that room having done their work. They come into that room with written reports, and where is ours? Once you have had the conversations and you're committed to the conversations, commit it to writing. Now, I am very specific about and very prescribed about what I think a good parent report is, and I've given you a few pages attached to the back of the PowerPoint. Good parent reports are parallel to the IEP document. So they parallel the conversation. We're not out here talking about summer camp. Woo, right? We're talking about how do I feel that my student is doing in each of these areas as we're discussing it through the IEP document. We are incorporating, when we get really good, I'm taking each of my private providers' opinions. I am assimilating it in my head and incorporating it into the report. This takes a couple of years. You're not going to be able to do this out of the gate. It takes a couple of years. Because now I go to my private providers and I say, this is where she is in school, talk to me, talk to me. I pull it into my report and I present the information, okay? And then it's very important that you take this report and you give it to the director of special education or the learning coordinator, whoever is the person who's facilitating your meeting. Your report, please, please do not let your report be a frozen turkey. Your report should be given to everybody that wants to see it in advance to allow them to be open to what your interests are, okay? I like people to write their reports for many reasons. Number one, it allows you to edit your own thoughts. And we all need to edit our own thoughts. It is impossible to sit in a room. How many of us have left those meetings? I heard this, I heard this, I heard this, and then we get in the car and go, I wish I'd said that. We've all done it. Make that stop. Make that stop. Get the information. Put down in writing what you're feeling, what you're thinking, your impressions of your child, and then allow that to get out to everybody in advance, all right? So, I'm going to summarize. We do not allow IEP meetings to happen to us. In the back of my PowerPoint, there's a separate sheet that says, 2 months in advance, you're pulling out your document. You're going over it. You're trying to understand if you have a good grasp on where the goals are. You're in conversations with people. Is there anything that you're going to say that I haven't heard before? You're summarizing what you've heard, what you're feeling, and what you're thinking. And now I'm going to talk to you about how you express the content of what goes into that report. Okay? Remember where I started. The two foundational pieces that support that meeting have to do with how well we learn to communicate and how skilled we are when we realize we're faced with conflict. It is not uncommon for people to say to me at this point, it's kind of not my job. That's kind of the school's job. They really need to figure out how to be better at it. People say it to me all the time. And I say in response to that, what? It should be a partnership. Who benefits if I get really good at this work? My child. Do I like everybody on my kids' team? No. Do they know it? Never. Never. Not relevant. What's relevant is how good I become as an advocate. What is relevant is that I hone my skills. What is relevant is that I recognize it's a partnership. This is where she's in school. These are the people who went into this profession. These are the people that I have to get the job done. I'm going to leverage that to the max. Okay. I think you have to be able to step back and say, what part of this is me? What part am I doing in this right now? What part of this is what they're doing? What part of this is the construct of this meeting, right? So the other piece I want to talk to you about is that this is a very important concept for parents with children with special needs to understand. That while our children are in school, we are protected under IDEA. It's an entitlement law. We are entitled to these services. And it's a very simple procedure in that we have one case manager, there's one coordination, there's one funding source, right? When our children turn either 18 or 22 and they leave the school system, your kids, because you're in an elementary district, this probably hasn't started to seep into your contents yet. Do any of you have kids that are with special needs that are over 18? Okay, so when you come out and you go out into the system, whether you go on to post-secondary education or you go on to a vocational opportunity, your disability no longer entitles you to anything. You are eligible for most things. There's a few exceptions to that, but that's another talk, okay? And what I want you to know that is there's no absolute source of funding. There's no one case manager. There's no one person who's going to come up to your student at work or at college or anywhere else and say, understand you have a disability. How can we help you? It ain't going to happen. Our students and we as parents need to understand what good advocacy looks like, because once you get out, you have to understand what effective advocacy looks like in order to continue to get support and services. If people learn to be contentious in the school system, guess what their kids get when they get out? Bupkis. And I have friends, I have people that I know right now who have 24-year-old kids who are finally learning this lesson. Gosh, you know, I'm really sorry, Mrs. Marcus, but we don't have any slots in this program for Johnny. There is no law that says that organization can't do that. No law that says that agency can't do that. I will tell you that there are people at the federal agencies and at the PASS agencies, the people that you go to get your benefits, who have caseloads of 45 to 50 people. Where do you think unpleasant people fall on their caseloads? Repeatedly to the bottom. And then they're shocked when they discover that somebody across the street who's only been on the caseload for 2 years got services. So I say this to you because learn these skills now. Learn what really good collaborative partnership means and looks like, because it will serve you and your students so very, very well, because this is the golden ring. When parents and staff learn what good communication and problem solving looks like and how that goes into good self-advocacy, that's the work. That's the essence of the work. I don't do this, ladies and gentlemen, for you. Sorry. I don't do it for me. I don't do it for them. I do it because this is what will make the kids' lives more successful, okay? This is what will move our students forward in their adult lives. I know it doesn't seem real now because your kids are in elementary or middle school, but in a blink, they're gonna be out, and you got the rest of their lives to figure out how to help them navigate with their disability, right? And so it's really learning what really is good problem solving look like. So let's talk about that. I said to you earlier, and I mean it, you will not go through this process without some conflict. You will have conflicts, all right? It's how we go into them. Now, so I'm drilling into that hexagon now that has to do around conflict resolution and skill building. I am not going to be able to do this great justice, so I'm going to hit the high, hard ones that I really want you to come away with, okay? There are 3 common responses to conflict. This is wired into all of us. Everybody know these, right? It's kind of a common, well-known factor now. There is no escaping this. There's no finessing this. You could go to 30 years of mediation and negotiation training. Every human being has a visceral gut response in the face of conflict. It is either to fight, to run away, or to lay down and play dead. There are ways, and I'll come back sometime and do a workshop for you, and we'll go through an instrument that you will learn your natural response to conflict. We all have one. There's no right or wrong. There's no judgment in it. We have one. I told you a little bit about myself in response to conflict with my son. What is my natural response to conflict? I gave you enough information that you should know. I fight. And if I can't win, what do? I flee. That's me. I go in for the fight, straight for the jugular. If I can't get it quick enough, I'm out. It's just, I let everybody know that at my office. I let everybody I know that I work with. I tell everybody that. And this is the joke in my office. Ooh, Sue's out. Sue's out. Because it's what I do. I'm asking you to just have a little bit of an awareness about maybe what you know your own response to conflict to be. When you are in a meeting and it's not going right, do you just shut down? I'm going to shut down. Do you get angry? Okay, so fight. I'm going to fight. All right? Or I want to get out of here. Get me out of here. The best education you can provide yourselves is to replace those visceral responses. They're never going to go away. Is to recognize they happen. They happen to me daily, day in and day out. I can be in a conversation with somebody and say, man, I'm going to get you. In my head, I stop and say, Sue, and I recalibrate what I do. Because how could I possibly be a mediator and a parent mentor if I held on to my natural response to conflict, which was to fight or to get out? I wouldn't be in a job for very long, would I? It's a trained series of a thought process. And everything I do comes from this book. I really encourage all of you to take the time to find this book on Amazon. It's readily available. It's very thin. Has anybody read it? It's a very easy read. Thank you, Amy's read it. It's a very easy read. There isn't anything in it about education that's not relevant. What's relevant about this book is it explains how to approach conversations from an interest-based discussion. That's the third thing I want to ask you to remember. One was agenda. The second was, is there anything you're going to say about my kid that I've never heard before? And the third is to educate myself on what an interest-based discussion is, further than what I can do with you in 15 minutes. But I'll get you there a little bit, okay? So this book was written in the late 70s, early 80s. I have my year wrong in my head. Somehow I think it's early 80s. And it absolutely turned negotiation on its head. So when we think about going into an IEP meeting, we think it's them and us. Sometimes we think that, or there are two sides of the table. This book will tell you, wrong approach. And it absolutely fundamentally changed the way the vast majority of industries and businesses and countries shifted their perspective on mediation around war, mediation around labor union contracts, mediation on very big issues. And I would submit to you this is the most powerful thing that you can learn to do as your student's advocate, is to move away from that visceral response you have of anger, that visceral response that I want to get out, and lean deeply into what is my interest, what is their interest? Well, they may not be the same, but how do we both understand each other's interests and to get into the conversation that way? So, in collaborative problem solving, this all is in the book. It's when parties come together to work side by side to solve the problem. So that's just to me like, yeah, right? That's like, sorry for the people in the room, they're from the school team. That's like when they say, we're all a part of the same team. Okay, I gotta tell you, I don't like that. Don't like it. Why don't I like it? Because that team meets once a week. And they all sat before we came in the room, okay? So, not really. We're not really on the same team. That's okay. That's okay. I don't need to be on that team. That's a strong team. That's a good team. That's an educational team. I need that team. I need that team to meet once a week without me. I need that team to meet before I walk in the room. I need them to be as tight and as well-oiled as they can possibly be. Okay? But I do want to come in and that we get to the same interests. But I just want to shift that misnomer a little bit. You're never going to be a part of the educational team. And you don't really need to be, all right? You don't negotiate for opposing positions. So when you come into a room and thinking, I think they're going to say this about a placement, I think they're going to say this about a goal, I think they're going to say this about an intervention, and I'm going to say this, you are immediately walking in locked in position. This work that you do before a meeting is to drill past a position to go down into interest. And I'll talk about what they are. A statement that describes one possible solution that meets a need or concern as a position. I want my child to have 60 minutes of OT a week. Position. I want my child to have a one-on-one aid. position. I want my kid to be in that classroom with that teacher, position. You want to give me more? We don't think your kid needs a one-to-one aid, position. We don't think your student needs 30 minutes of OT, position. We don't think your child needs that teacher in that classroom, position. I mean, the list is endless. It's endless, right? Position, position. And very often, what happens is somebody puts a position out. Here's mine. Right? And then the other person goes, here's mine. And that's what ends up to be 2 to 3 hour IEP meetings, of which I have absolutely no comprehension. Let me go on record and on tape as saying no comprehension. Because if people have done their work beforehand, cannot fathom why we would be in a discussion for 3 hours, okay? The interest is the underlying need or concern that you're trying to have met. So when you find that you're about to utter a position, I'm asking you to drill down into the interest. It is what is motivating you to seek that solution. So let's talk about examples. I want my child to have a one-on-one aid. This is me, okay? This is me. You need to understand this, okay? She was in school in a hearing impaired program. They didn't have one-to-one aids. I wanted her to have a one-to-one aid. Why? The exercise is an exercise. You take out a piece of paper and a pencil and you write all this down. Because I want her to be physically safe. She's a bolter. I want her to have the best possible learning environment, and I think one-to-one instruction with someone will be best for her. I want one person that she'll be able to be bond with and be available to her all the time. I want her to be with her peers so she can develop interpersonal skills. You may hear a conflict in there, but it's not. I was looking for an adult to be the mediator with the peers. The goal here is not to judge your own interest or to judge somebody else's. It's to get everything down on the piece of paper that is driving your desire to ask for that position. Make sense? I want the peace of mind knowing that she is well cared for at all times. And I can tell you all these years later, you can see the emotion that still comes from me. I was petrified that she was going to bolt off the playground. That was my driver. That was it. And so the school could, only because we could get to interests, put their interests on the other side of the paper, which is to say, we do think we can provide her an appropriate educational program without a one-to-one person. We can provide her enough academic support. We want her to be physically safe, and we will do whatever we need to do to make her physically safe. We want to encourage her independence and her ability to bond with a variety of adults. That's a very good interest to have on behalf of my daughter, right? We want to avoid setting a precedent that will be providing one-to-one aids. Let's be honest. Let's get it all down on paper. Because I was coming in thinking, you're just not going to give it to me because you don't want to pay for it. Position. Right? But in fact, they had so many valid reasons as to why it really wasn't in my daughter's best interest. And really, what was my driver? Her safety. So what did we talk about instead of a one-to-one aid? For 1 hour, we talked about safety. And what was the safety network that we were going to build for her, okay, on the playground. And what happened in that 1 hour of us talking about safety, because I could get to my driver? What happened for us as a team? Better. Say it, trust. Better. They met me exactly where I needed to be met, which is I had a daughter who one time was on a tricycle on Milwaukee Avenue because she had bolted from a preschool, okay? I'm never going to recover from that. So they met me and said, we got it, we hear it. Let's explain to you what we're going to do. And here are all the people in this building now who are going to know. And here's everybody in every classroom who's going to know. And here's, wah, right? But I could move off of my position around having a one-to-one aid because I was able to get to my interest of petrified for her safety. Here's another one. My daughter came into the world, as many children do, with so many sensory needs. Like, right? Wow, uses the floor as a slip and slide. Like, cannot get enough proprioceptive input. Okay, do any of you have one of these? Okay, okay, so, and she's going through another period now in adolescence where it's coming up again, where everything's getting hit. So to me, the only solution was more OT. More OT, let's just have more OT. Give me more minutes. Okay? And I brought in the private OTs, and I brought in all sorts of people, right, to say she needs more OT. And I committed myself to write down on a piece of paper, what is it? What is it that's really making me crazy? And what's really making me crazy is at the end of the day, and to this day, my daughter chews, anybody got one? Okay? Clothes down to a point where like everything gets hemmed to here. And her poor little thumbs are forever kind of scarred. All right? Con death. So what did I really want as her mother? I just wanted her to stop doing that. I really don't care if you give her any OT minutes. I really don't care if she ever sees an OT. I just want her to stop chewing her thumbs. Right? But do you understand how we can get locked in position because it's what we think? So the benefit of what we were able to do to provide her what she needed for proprioceptive input and oral input, the teacher came back to me and said, "You have changed seismically my whole class. It's the most wonderful thing that has ever happened. All my kids get sensory breaks now. All my kids jump up and down every 10 minutes. All my kids can have something to chew on if they," all right? And I am standing in front of you right now telling you today I have no idea how many OT minutes my daughter gets. She doesn't chew her hands. She doesn't come home dysregulated. She's available. Okay? Do you understand? So the exercise is, we write an agenda, we get our IEP, we articulate goals in a way that says, this is what I'd like them to learn, help me understand how we translate that into a goal. We write a report. We edit the report. We edit the report. We give the report to a friend who is dear to us and say, read this and tell me what it sounds like to you. Can you hear my interest in this? Am I saying what it is that I need to say about what we're hoping to see in terms of progress for John or Amar or Kathy, whomever, right? And then you absolutely go through this exercise of taking a piece of paper and writing down what your interests are that are driving some of those positions. And believe me, every one of you are sitting here right now with a position in your head, whether it's what room you want them in, what intervention you want used, who you want to have do the intervention. Every one of you has it, and you've got to be able to drill down into why is it I want that. And then when you get really good, if you feel pushback from school, I want you to write down all the reasons you think they're pushing back. That's when you get really good at this. And then you get into the conversation this way. This is work, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't want IEP meetings to happen to you, if you want to change the experience, and if you want to become a really good advocate, you got to do a little Martha. You got to do a little work up front. You got to be committed to this process. And I just want to acknowledge to all of you in the room, I never want anybody to leave my talks feeling like, oh my God, I got so much more to do. It's exhausting work, and you really have to know where you are in the space at any given year. And I want to go back to a slide because I glossed over this, and it's kind of a nice point and not a bad place to end, to tell you the truth. The power is in how we tell our story. The power is not in how well we understand the law. The power is understanding in how we tell our story. Because if I can drive my interest-based discussion with the passion that I have and the emotion I have around you are my educational team, I need for you to hear what my vision, my goals, my dreams, my needs are. And I can do that in a way, listen to my choice of words, they can hear it. If my choice of language is such, they can hear it. If I have edited my report in a way that they can absorb it, that's the power that we have. And if you're in a place as a parent, this is what I want to give you permission to understand. Where, because I've been in here many, many times, ladies and gentlemen, many times. I am overwhelmed this year. I'm overwhelmed, okay? You need to say that. You need to go to your team and say, overwhelmed. Or, I can't take on any more learning about this right now. You're going to come out of those periods, all right? Have any of you ever heard Ken Moses speak? Okay, you guys need to have Ken Moses come. Ken Moses is a psychologist from Evanston who's dedicated his practice to connectage and loss. Himself a father of a son with a disability, spends a lot of time with families with children with disabilities, and talks about the cycle or the process of grieving. And the specificity around when we as parents sometimes can be in denial. It's a beautiful place. And he says, go there, stay there. Have a little vacation. right? It's not a bad place to be sometimes. Sometimes we're angry, okay? It's not the school's job to make us not angry. It's not their job to make us not deny. That's a natural part of the process of what we're in. So sometimes I have a lot of parents come to me and I say, learn more, they're not ready, they're not available, they're not there. And then unfortunately, too many people wait until our kids are like 20 years old and then they're ready and you're like, oops. Now we got a lot to learn. So we do try to push that a little bit further down in the process. But I do want you to hear from me that, trust me, I'm not Joan of Arc all the time. I have lots of days where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I really can't do this right now, okay? It is only when you understand what it means to move beyond a position and to get into an interest-based discussion and to do that well that you come into your power as an advocate. It is not uncommon that I have gone into meetings angry. And what I do the whole meeting is to say to the school team, help me understand how you're seeing this. Help me understand how you see this. And I don't talk about how I'm seeing it. I don't talk about. Now, why do I do that? Why would I do that? Why would I spend 45 minutes of my day saying to the team, tell me how you see this. Tell me how you see my daughter. Tell me how you see this problem. Tell me how you see this intervention working. Get their perspective. Why else? It's even more Machiavellian than that. It's more sinister. Why do I do it? To hone my skills. I literally go in and do it like practice. Because the key to doing what I'm talking about is learning how to listen. If you cannot listen to what other people are saying, you can never understand their interests. If you can never understand their interests, you're never going to get them to understand your interests. That's the simple equation. So it is very common for me to go in and just say, okay, I'm here just to listen. I don't like it. My stomach's flipping. Sometimes I leave just as angry, but I'm listening. So this is my very last point to you, because this is what I want you to understand in the very cursory way. As we all walk through life, this is kind of good lessons, but this is extremely important when we have a lot of emotion in the conversation around our kids. When we are trying to convey something, there are 3 parts to that. And I think, I'm not going to do this justice. I go to 2 to 3 day workshops on this stuff, all right? And you all know this. You can go way deep into this. I'm just trying to give you an awareness so you have self-awareness in conversations. There are 3 parts when we say something. There are 3 parts. And when someone says something to us, this is proven over and over again in research around communication. One is the verbal message, one is the nonverbal message, and one is the paraverbal message. Everybody knows what the verbal message is, right? It's the words. It's the content of the words, it's the choice of the words, it's how we say it, all right? Best when concise, best when effective, best when not full of blame, accusation, challenging, best when said in a way that somebody can hear it. Nonverbal messages are what? Body language, rolling of the eyes, position in a chair. And it's 55% of what we hear and what is heard is in our body language. So how many of you have been in a meeting where somebody rolls their eyes? Everybody has. And what does that do in the room? So if you're speaking as the parent, and I'll pick on them, sorry, who should I pick on? The OT rolls her eyes. What happens for you? Very disrespectful. You have no idea what she was rolling her eyes about. You lost it for the meeting. Do you love it? Did the OT say anything? She didn't say anything. She rolled her eyes. Shut her down completely. It happens all the time. 55% of what's intended. When I speak to educators, this is what I say to them. I am pouring my heart out to you, and you've got a laptop open that you're typing into. Paraverbal messages are the tone, the pace, it's the delivery that we use, all right? The pacing of our voice. It's how we say something, not what we say, right? So it can be, I got it. I got it. I got it. 3 completely different messages. It is 38% of what is perceived. are understood by the person in what we're trying to say. Who wants to do the math for me very fast? 55 and 38. 55 and 38 is 93. What does it leave for the actual words? Mind-boggling. I would say to you, if you have not met somebody and you're talking about your child, do not use email. Pick up the phone so they can hear your voice. I absolutely agree with that. What did I just say at the beginning? They came in this morning. I got a phone call from somebody that says you need to participate in an email conversation that's going on before you start your presentation. I came in them. I asked them, can I have the wireless password? I opened up my computer. I literally was witnessing an argument, and I shut my computer. I'm not participating in that conversation, right? I'm going to pick up the phone so they can hear that I'm not angry about it, but man, the emails that were flying, that's exactly right. So it is so very, very important that when you speak, right, when you come into meetings and it's the emotion about our child, this is all I'm trying to make in this point, we can't help it. I'm not trying to tell you not to be that way. I'm just saying to have an awareness that if your tone, that's 38%, has a velocity to it, and if your body language, because you're tense, 55% is coming across a certain way, pretty sure nobody's hearing what you're saying. All right? Which brings us back to why we write a written report. That's why we write a written report. So that if I get caught off guard by an emotion in the room, if I get caught off guard, I can go back and say, this is what I meant to have come across, okay? And then the last piece that are on my slides in this section have to do with listening. And I already told you a little bit about that part. And then the very last thing I want to share with you is that everything I do is rooted in 30 years of research that comes out of the major higher level educational institutions, and also, though, however, is common sense. That school, family, and community partnerships, and the work is called in its broad context is partnership work. Out of Johns Hopkins, Harvard has a study, a Center on School, Family, and Community Partnerships. The University of Chicago has one. Tells you that the stronger that these bonds are, the better the students do. The more engaged families are, the better the students do. This does not matter whether we're talking about higher achieving students, students who are in just the general ed setting, or whether we have kids who are significantly impacted by their disability. The stronger the partnership, the better the student does. All right? The more aligned the private provider and the school and the family are with what intervention is the right thing to do for the student, the better the student does. So if you really want to do homework, right, I would encourage you to Google partnership and to look at the broad research that exists out there around the impact of them. This is the direction that I hope I can help some of the macro conversations go with Core 25. Like, what kind of work can you do with Core 25 that really moves partnership forward? Because that begins to sift down into the culture of a building. It sifts down into the culture of a district in a big way, so that then we have a little bit more flexibility in our individual conversations. Does that make sense? So that you get to a point in a district where people say, that's not how we do that here. That's not how we have conversations. That's not how we speak to each other. That's not the culture of what we have, all right? And it helps all of us individually then. I'm done. You gave me my extra 10 minutes. Thank you very much.